over to Steven, facing a 415k bet. What do you do in this scenario whenever you're in his shoes? Well, first things first. Get out your superhero cape. You got to get your superhero cape on, okay? And then you have to get your X-ray vision glasses. Hello, everyone. I'm Jonathan Little for PokerNews.com, here today with a hand from a very, very high-stakes tournament put on by Party Poker. Thanks to them for letting me use their footage. Make sure you check out their YouTube channel at youtube.com/partypokerlive. Let's get right to the action.
Position.
Here we pick it up. Pre-flop. Steven Chidwick, world-class player, number 6 on the all-time tournament leaderboard with about $34 million in cashes, raises it up from the cutoff with ace-queen offsuit. And then Bryn Kenney in the small blind elects to call with queen jack of hearts. Let's take a listen to what the commentators have to say about this.
He does call fairly standard there, right? Standard?
Yeah, fairly standard, although nowadays you see a lot, especially in the high rollers, that people don't want to just call from the small blind because you give the big blind a really good price. So some of the guys just 3-bet all their hands in the small blind they want to play.
But one of the queen jack suited, one of the hands, really, it's up there in the hands he doesn't mind playing three-way there,
yeah,
right?
for sure.
So let's discuss that concept right there. We see Stefan calling the big blind as well with ace-7 offsuit, which is perfectly fine. Let's discuss this call from Bryn Kenney, though. Number 1 in all-time tournament cashes in poker tournaments. He likes to call the queen jack of hearts. The commentator said that sometimes people are opting to 3-bet every hand they want to play from the small blind facing a raise. And that is a perfectly fine strategy when there is a substantial rake in the game, like if you're playing cash games, right? But in tournaments, you pay the rake when you enter the tournament, so there is no rake taken out of every pot. And what that results in is you get to call a decent amount from the small blind from a game theory optimal point of view. I actually want to show you a chart that I have available at pokercoaching.com. This is just right there in the tools section. These are the GTO preflop charts. And here we are looking at 60 big blinds deep, small blind versus a cutoff raise, assuming there are no payout implications. And there will be payout implications throughout the tournament, so make sure you pay attention to those. As there are more payout implications, maybe you want to call a bit more or a little bit less, depending on the exact spot. Anyway, this is the GTO strategy with no payout implications. The hands in red are 3-bet. The hands in green are called. And take a look at all of these hands that are opting to call from the small blind versus a cutoff raise. King 3 suited. It's pretty loose, right? 10-7 suited, 8-6 suited, 5-4 suited, pocket 2s. Well, I don't think you should necessarily call this wide. I think you can certainly shave off like King 6 suited and lower, 10-7 suited, 8-6 suited, 5-4 suited. Maybe like Jack 10 offsuit, Queen 10 offsuit, Ace 8 offsuit. If you shave off those, I think that's perfectly reasonable. That said, they're profitable to play. Just because a play is profitable doesn't necessarily mean you should make it, though, because let's say King 3 suited profits 0.0001 big blind. You'd probably rather not play it. You may say, but if you call with all these junky hands, doesn't that leave your range vulnerable to being 3-bet by the big blind? And it actually does a little bit, which is why you want to make sure you are sticking around with some of these best hands as well, like ace jack suited, ace queen offsuit, king queen suited, hands that can realistically stick around if you face aggression. Also, the 3-better from the big blind has to worry about the initial raiser having a decently strong hand too, so it's not like you have to defend at the entire minimum defense frequency, whatever that would be, because it's roughly split among you and the cutoff. So this is a spot where you are 3-betting the best hands, you are 3-betting some bluffs, call it bluffs with like ace 10 offsuit, queen 10 offsuit, king 8 suited, king 10 suited, etc. But we do see a lot of the calling hands are hands that flop reasonably well, right? We have these suited connected hands, pairs, suited ace highs, suited king highs, big cards. And we see queen jack suited opting to call and 3-bet, it mixes it up. This is 60 big blinds deep. Let's take a look at 40 big blinds deep really quick, see if that changes anything. We see now that 40 big blinds deep, still a whole lot of calling, right? This may be surprising to some of you. Slightly different strategy. We do see a few all-ins being used over a min raise. This may be shocking to some, but it turns out you should be ripping it all in for 40 big blinds over a cutoff raise when you are in the small blind with these hands in dark red. The light red hands 3-bet small. As we see, we're being a little bit more polarized in this scenario. When we 3-bet small, we have our best hands that can easily call it off, and then just a smattering of bluffs. So pretty cool strategy, and I want you to get away from the idea of I have to 3-bet or fold every hand from the small blind, because that really is only the case when there is a substantial rake involved in the game.
Although
Back
that's
to the
kind of
hand.
dangerous if you only play hands that you wouldn't mind playing three-way. The other guys will catch on to that.
Here, the commentator saying if you only call with stuff like suited connectors, small pairs, etc., won't the opponents catch on to that? And the answer is, it doesn't really matter all that much as long as your range is well protected, including some of the best hands. All right, flop comes king, 9, 2. This gives Bryn a gut shot with a backdoor flush draw, gives Stephen Chidwick ace high, Stefan absolutely nothing. So this is a spot where Bryn's going to check, Stefan's going to check every time. It's going to get around to Stephen. And what I want you to do is I want you to pause the video and ask yourself what you would do in this situation with the ace-queen offsuit. Would you check? Would you bet small, like a third pot? Would you bet medium, like 2/3 pot? Or would you bet big, like full pot? Pause the video, and in the comment section below, write down what you would do. I'll wait for you to do it. Go ahead. All right, did you do it? If you didn't, you're not trying to get better at poker. If you did do it, good. So this is a spot where I definitely think Steven can mix it up between betting small and checking, depending on what he thinks primarily about Bryn Kenney's flat calling range in the small blind. If we go back over here and look at Bryn Kenney's flat calling range, 40 big blinds deep, you see it actually has a whole lot of medium connected big cards that connect pretty well with this board. It's not really a range you want to be betting into. If he uses a slightly different strategy, perhaps his range is a little bit weaker, right? But even then, it still contains a whole lot of the various King X hands. So this is a spot where you got to be a little bit careful betting, but if you throw out a small bet, you'll get your opponent to fold out, like these lower pairs some portion of the time. You'll get them to fold out other hands with equity. If they want to call with, like, you know, Queen Jack or Jack 10, it's fine. So I think you can go either way between checking or betting small in this spot. You don't want to bet big, though, because when you start betting big, then you're just really only getting called by hands that have you in pretty good shape. Or that have you in very bad shape. They're in good shape against you.
Stefan and Stevie both with ace high. Stevie's ace queen high way out in front, though. And this is a board that, obviously, Stevie will know he's ahead of a fade 80% of the time, but Bryn can obviously have a king, but also a lot of his hands are going to check call here. But does he still have to bet this because it's three-way and protects his hand?
I think he can do whatever. I like a small bet.
He can do whatever. I like a small bet, says the commentator here. Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I definitely think you can go either way. It's tough because playing against players like Bryn Kenney who get in there and battle hard, you have to be careful that you don't just like throw out way too many bets, because Bryn will put in the check races and will attempt to bluff the turn / river. He's going to put you in bad spots, right? It's probably the reason why he's the #1 tournament casher in the world in terms of tournament winning. So it's a tough scenario, but I do think you probably just want to throw out a bet. But if you felt like checking, it's certainly acceptable. If you want to test your skills and take a multi-table tournament quiz that I made just for you here, check that out at pokercoaching.com/MTT online. That's going to test your skills and see how you would play in various scenarios. And if you're playing great, good, you're probably crushing the games. But if you're not, well, you want to make sure you're improving. And figuring out what you need to improve on will go a long way to helping you improve your skills. So check that out at pokercoaching.com/MTT online.
Because people will have to play really honest against this. So everyone's hands will be fairly face up after this bet.
Here the commentator says everyone's hands are going to be fairly face up. They're going to be face up. Like, Bryn's not going to call here with 8-7 of clubs, right? But he will stick around here with any king, any 9, maybe even stuff like pocket 6s for a small bet. He'll also call with gut shots. He may put in raises sometimes. I don't think Bryn's range is going to be... I mean, it may be face up in that it's going to be something reasonable, but ace-queen is still in kind of marginal shaping at something reasonable. So it's not like you have super clear information, like if you bet a third pot and your opponent calls, you're just always dead, right? You don't know that.
And if you think they will call enough worse hands, you can just check it down after this, and you still make a few hands that have 2 cards that can hit fold.
I will say a lot of the merit in betting small here is that you're just not going to face tough turn and river spots. Like, say it does go check, check, check on the flop, and then either opponent bets the turn. Steven probably has to fold his ace-queen, but if he bets the flop, gets called by one player, then he can check it down. He's going to realize his equity pretty well. Essentially, this just lets you play small slash medium-sized pot with your small slash medium hand, which is exactly what you want to be doing.
Apparently you can get called by Queen Eye as well, so.
Yep, he does get called by the gut shot, which misses.
Notice if Steven bet bigger on the flop, Bryn probably would have folded or raised this Queen Jack of Hearts, which is not actually good for Steven. So it turns out, against this exact hand, it works out pretty well. And notice if he was against the king, he puts in almost no money, a third pot. And, you know, he's going to lose a third pot, which is not that big of a deal. Turns to 5, he's going to go check here pretty much every time, I have to presume. This is a spot where Bryn's not really going to have much of a leading range. And Steven is mainly going to be betting with his best hands and his draws. Because once you do bet the flop with a wide range and your opponent calls, when your opponent calls, they fold out a lot of their junk, right? So Bryn has something. Now that Bryn has something, the ranges are much closer. And when that is the case, you want to be doing a whole lot more checking. I actually discussed this thoroughly in my tournament masterclass. Make sure you check that out if you have not already. It is a big course. It's about 30 hours long. It also has a whole lot of hand history reviews that are an additional, 20 hours or so, where I go through my deep runs over the last few months. So make sure you check that out. You can actually get that on sale right now because it's Valentine's Day. Check that out at pokercoaching.com/Valentines. All right, this is a spot where, well, let's see if they play like I would have played.
Stefan folded his ace high.
Bryn checks. Please check, Steven. Prove me right.
Stevie now with another decision.
Please. Sell some Valentine's Day poker coaching memberships. Yes. All right, check. Good. Now, let's see if we can predict what's going to happen on the river. All right, this is a spot where when Bryn is on the river with Queen High, this is definitely one of his worst hands he could have, right? So bluffing is always a reasonable option when you have one of your worst hands. Also, whenever it goes check, Steven probably doesn't have too many really strong hands, like king, queen, or better, which means that in this scenario, Bryn does have some nut hands, or some effective nut hands, like king, queen, right? If we go back to his pre-flop range, let's see how king, queen would have played. We see here king, queen suited calls a lot pre-flop 60 big blinds deep. If we were 40 big blinds deep, king, queen suited calls every time. So you see he clearly has king, queen here. He has some king jacks. He has some king nines, has some king eights, right? So Bryn actually does have a pretty large amount of nut hands here. So this is a spot where I definitely think he wants to be bluffing with his obvious bluffs. And this queen jack of hearts is definitely an obvious bluff. When Bryn is betting in this scenario, he's going to be very polarized because his bluffing range is queen high, queen jack, queen 10 suited, and jack 10 suited, right? So this is a spot where Bryn's bluffing range is really, really junky, and his value range is actually really, really strong. So I think he wants to bet using a pretty big bet size. And then Steven's going to be in a tough spot.
Sort of, you're saying, you know, Bryn
So-
does have a lot of kings in this spot.
Pot
So
750k.
Bryn were to put out a bet here,
Immer noch so wie
imagine he
vorhin.
will.
2-3, Dom ist rausgeflogen.
Not a great
Bryn
spot
goes
for Stevie.
415. I think 415 may actually be a little bit small. I gotta presume in this scenario, Bryn has, you know, at least 12 combinations of very, very obvious bluffs with the queen high slash jack high. And he doesn't, I mean, he has some nut combinations, but not a ton if you think about it. He has like king, queen, maybe, and better. Not actually all that many combinations. So when it gets around, well, whenever you don't have a ton of nut combinations and a decent number of bluffs, you usually want to be using a bigger bet size. Again, we discussed this thoroughly in the tournament masterclass and how to break down the math to figure out your bet size. Make sure you check that out again at pokercoaching.com/Valentines to get a nice discount. All right, over to Steven. Facing a 415k bet. What do you do in this scenario whenever you're in his shoes? Well, first things first. Get out your superhero cape. You got to get your superhero cape on, okay? And then you have to get your x-ray vision glasses. And now, what you do, think through the hand. Put a read on the opponent and go with it.
I want to say, I think if he bets, he should go quite big here because he either has like a really strong hand like top pair or better, or a missed hand like queen jack, jack 10. Steven doesn't have the best hand to call here with because he has the queen.
Right. Blocks some of the hands he wants his opponent to have, which he's saying. A hand like queen jack with a backdoor flush draw,
Yeah.
queen jack of diamonds no longer possible.
Yeah.
Sander pointed out 45 seconds in this event. I think purely because the event was scheduled not to have a shot clock, but then the guys wanted it, and it was a compromise. So they give them 45 seconds.
He makes the call. Superhero rewarded. He can go back to being Clark Kent. This is a spot where, as the commentator said, Ace-Queen offsuit's actually a pretty bad bluffing, or bluff calling hand. A hand to call the bluff, because when you have Ace-Queen, you make it more difficult for Bryn to have Queen-Jack and Queen-10, which are two of the really logical bluffing hands. That said, I'm sure Steven has played a lot with Bryn, and look, I haven't played with Bryn all that much, but I know Bryn gets in there in battles. He's going to find bluffs that other people do not necessarily find because, for the most part, people overfold. Now, I don't know what he thinks about Steven's strategy. He probably thinks Steven plays just really, really good GTO poker. And if that's the case, he may actually try to over bluff in this scenario. And I think that if you know your opponent is going to be over bluffing, then in turn, you should over call. And again, this Ace-Queen is not a particularly great hand to call with. I'd venture to say you may rather have like Ace-7, which sounds a little bit funny because, Ace-7 is a weaker hand than Ace-Queen. But Ace-Queen, that queen really does block a large number of the potential bluffs that Bryn could have. That said, Steven put on the cape, made the hero call, and scooped up a nice pot. Hope you enjoyed this hand. If you did, do me a favor. Click the like button, click subscribe. That goes a long way to helping the YouTube overlords know that you like this show. Good luck in your games. Have a great, great week. Thank you so much again for being here. Be nice to someone, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want more strategy lessons, pre-flop charts, and interactive quizzes, make sure you get your free membership to pokercoaching.com right now at pokercoaching.com/free. I'll talk to you next time.